Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ronnie Burke. I'm a clinical social worker. Um, One second. Yes, and today I'd like to bring a really interesting topic. I'm a sex therapist as well, and a lot of the elements we do is with physical disabilities as well. So in the next hour, I'd like to there is a lot to get through, so hopefully we'll manage to get through. But at the same time, there will be like a 6 to 7 minute video to express how people with disabilities feel. We will be discussing that along the way. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat or to raise your hands if you can. I'm very, very happy to answer any questions along the way, but we will try and get through to a lot of the information that I'm going to bring today. So welcome. Um, One second. Okay, so what we'd like to do now is to gain a better perspective and understanding of sexuality and disabilities, to gain knowledge and understanding of sex therapy, to understand barriers and stigmas, and to provide reassurance while working with clients in their own sexuality, and to gain effecting tools. Okay. Um, this is the agenda which you've already seen. But we will be discussing sexuality and disability. We will discuss a few of the types of disabilities and sexual functioning. And finally, we will go into the role of the sex therapist in dealing with disabilities. So, uh, let's break the silence. Now, this is where I need a little bit of your participation. You're welcome. If you don't, it's okay too. But I would be happy to hear anyone if you're welcome to join and just write a few answers. My first question to all of you is, when I say what is sexuality, can you just share, maybe type in the chat what goes on in your mind? What triggers for you when you say what is sexuality? Just think about anything, any word that comes up in your mind when you're saying sexuality, what is that for you? You're welcome to write if you want. If not, then okay, let me see, maybe somebody's written. Desires, very good, yes. Desires, sexual desires, wonderful. Any more? Okay. Yes, desires. Thank you for that. Anyone else would like to just one more chance before I move on? Okay. So one second. Great. How one experiences their own sexual being, wonderful. And so when we're looking at that together, okay, and when we add sexuality and disabilities, what goes through in your mind? Can you also write down what you feel? Because first of all, we spoke about sexuality, but then when you add on disabilities, is there anything that would you'd like to think that's going on through your mind at the moment? You spoke about desires, you spoke about the own person's sexuality and so on and so forth. Many other ideas can come through into your mind as well. Okay, something to think about anyway. All right. Now, what we're going to be doing is, first of all, let's see what you said about sexuality. One second. Uh, how one experiences a sexual being. We said this is a misconception that disabled aren't sexual. Absolutely wonderful. Well done. And we'll be dealing with that right now. And I'm thank you for that, because this is the taboo. People think that people with disabilities do not have a sexual relationship. So thank you for that. If anything, we can see that sexuality is look at this definition. It's huge. Okay, so when we say sexuality is a central aspect of being human throughout life. It encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, and reproduction. Sexuality is experienced and expressed in thoughts, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitudes, values, behaviors, practices, roles, and relationships. While sexuality can include all of these dimensions, not all of them are always experienced or expressed. So, sexuality is influenced by the interaction of biological, psychological, social, economical, political, cultural, legal, historical, religious, and spiritual factors. Look at that. So now, that is by the World Health Organization in 2008. Such a long and complex definition that involves a lot of things. What we do is we'll be dealing with mostly the psychological element of it, but we will be dealing with a little bit about the biological. But because we are therapists, or we come from the field of therapy, the idea is to understand more the psychological world of disabilities and sexuality. So as we said, and well done, you said it seems to be a taboo and rarely discussed in the same sentence. And as a result, a lot of disabled people do not have a regular sex life. Okay, sexuality and disability refers to a sexual behavior and practices to people with a disability. When I say people with disability, okay, I would like to, it's PWD. If you see this on the screen, please understand that's people with a disability. It's a short term for that, okay? But what I'm saying is that there's a misconception. People always think that they're asexual, but it's a definite misconception. And when we're talking about a physical disability, it's a physical condition that affects a person's mobility, obviously, physical capacity, stamina, or dexterity. This can include brain or spinal cord injuries, multiple sclerosis, and many other things. The causes of a physical disability are varied, and they can be divided into two categories as hereditary or acquired. And when we're saying hereditary, is a person has been born with a physical disability, and acquired could be due to an accident or infection or disease or side effect or medical condition. Okay. So many people with disabilities lack rights and privileges. Okay, and this is what we need to discuss today, which is important. People think that people, don't want sex when they have a disability. People with spinal cord injuries don't have sex. It's very important for us to understand more about us as sex therapists or therapists in general to understand that the two go together and to understand the rights and sexual rights of people with disabilities. Okay. And so when we are talking about the rights of people with disabilities, we're talking about the right to sexual expression. We're talking about the right to privacy. We're talking about the right to be informed about support services as well. The right to choose one's marital status. The right to have and not have children. That's the choice. Okay. And when you do have children, not to judge. The right to make one's own decision and develop one's own full potential. That's the most important, is to make one's own decisions and develop one's full potential. Okay. And to break the stereotype. And when we're talking about stereotypes behind disability and sex, it's desexualizing people with disabilities. It's, for example, thinking that men and women with disabilities don't need sex as they are asexual. We spoke about that. That's not true. Okay. Men and women with disabilities can't have real sex. Men and women with disabilities have more important needs than sex. People living with disabilities are not sexually attractive. Sex can't be spontaneous. People with disability do not need sex. Oh, we said that earlier, sorry. Men and women with disabilities should not have children. Okay, that's their choice. And boys and girls with disabilities do not need to have sex education. These are all the myths, okay? And what we need to do is what we call a sexual attitude reassessment called SAR. Okay, and what you do is it's time to readjust your way you feel about these sexuality in general, sex and disabilities, and reassess and see if you actually can cope with the change. Because some people with the stigmas, some people can't change, and that's the worst part about it. So what I'd like to do now, 1 second, is to show you this quick video about what people think.
Non-disabled people might think I don't want intimacy or relationships. I don't have any problem meeting people, but when it comes to the romance side of things, that's when it can be difficult. Having self-confidence is such an important part of my sexual expression. Having the confidence to start a relationship or situation where I might meet someone is the very first hurdle I have to overcome. I mean, on the dating sites on the internet, I feel flawed, so I'm not very good at selling myself, but you need to, and really that's down to confidence. Other people my age have had sex, they've had partners, and I've been left behind. I need the confidence to know and say to people that disabled bodies sometimes do different things, and that's okay.
I've been told that disabled people don't need the same emotional connection with other people, but making connection with people really improve my sense of who I am and my sexual well-being. Even if I don't have sex with that person, the emotional spark can be thrilling and fulfilling even on its own. And I think that making emotional connection are crucial to my mental health. Otherwise, I feel lonely and depressed. I find that being fully aware of someone is feeling is really intimate, and it makes you feel really close to them. Needing care and assistance when it can be difficult to find any private space get in the way of making meaningful connection. However, with understanding and respect, this is totally possible to achieve.
Someone said to me that it was disgusting that I have sex. It's like people think disabled people can't enjoy sex, or if it involves someone who doesn't have a beach-ready body, it's disgusting. Feeling desirable is really important to me, but it's difficult when there's no one like me in the pictures I see in the magazines, in films and online. It seems that society thinks disabled people can't be desirable because our bodies aren't like the ones you see in the media. But then I found out about the new generation of disabled models who are beautiful and sexy. Seeing their pictures has really helped me look at my body differently.
Some people think that disabled people, such as autistic people, don't like physical contact, but everyone is different. Having physical touch, that's not medical or personal care, is something most people want, regardless of ability. Whether just a hug or something more intimate, being able to enjoy exploring my own body and someone else's with consent is really important to how I feel connected to myself and others. Simple things can make all the difference, like when my partner's chair is put close to mine so we can hold hands. I think people need to leave their personal opinions at the door. I really feel that some of the things I've been told are so judgmental, and nothing would have happened to help me if they'd been allowed to openly voice those attitudes. I've heard that cuddle therapy, that's when people are paid to provide cuddles, is really popular, which just goes to show the importance of physical contact to people.
A friend asked me whether disabled people could enjoy sensual feelings. I put them straight and said yes, of course. Even if your disability impacts on some of your senses, there are other ways to enjoy sensual pleasure. I think having good, open attitudes is the best thing in intimate relationships, but also with professionals too. So if there is something the person needs to talk about, like sex, they can. Then I can talk about what gives me pleasure and what the other person likes too. I know people whose impairment means they don't have any sensation in the intimate parts of their body, but instead they love having their upper arm stroked, and it gives them such a great feeling. I think it's about finding out what you like and realising that we are all different regardless of disability. As human beings, we all have the ability to feel pleasure. Feeling pleasure really helps me. It makes my limbs relax and the pain goes away for a while. But also giving pleasure to someone else is very exciting. Sensual pleasure makes me feel good and I know I am alive.
Some people think disabled people can't have sex or be sexually active in any way. But the only way I am any different from anyone else is because I am a wheelchair user. Having a disability may mean that someone needs a bit of help or equipment, like having an accessible room, a hoist, or a bit of help with undressing. But my disability hasn't affected the physical side of things at all, apart from having to adjust and perhaps be more inventive. And sometimes I have to accept that there's no point in hyping myself up, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, if your legs are in a bad spasm, they are going to kick all over the place. You can't do anything about it. So you have to either not have full sex or, you know, you just go with the flow and think, oh well, not tonight. Everyone needs to remember that consensual sex does not have a rule book. Being extra inventive to overcome difficulties can be annoying, but also keeps things fun and interesting.
Okay, so those were in my previous lecture know that Emily Nagoski, that gave a wonderful introduction how people are feeling and what we're going to be dealing with today. That pleasure is the measure of sexual well-being. It is a deep enjoyment of what is happening in this moment. It should be at the center of our definition of sexual well-being. Okay. And it is pleasure able to enjoy sex. Okay. When we talk about intimacy, it's the closeness to yourself in times of solitude or closeness to others in moments of sharing and connecting. It reflects your inner world as almost nothing else does. Intimacy begins from the inside. It begins with our own self. Okay. And there's more to sex than just sexual intercourse. Okay. I spoke about that in my previous lecture, but it's important that to realize this, especially with the sex and the disabilities. Okay. But there is help. Talking to a partner about it and being open and honest about your feelings is extremely important in strengthening the relationship. Okay. Um, and there could be many issues with sexuality and physical, but there's some suggestions could be along the way, like a loss of sensation, a lack of muscle strength, muscle spasms, the inability to achieve or sustain an erection. These are all the different areas that could happen. There could be urinary or bowel incompetence. Fatigue is a common one. Joint pains, pain in the back or neck. Premature ejaculation is an extreme common one. Lack of vaginal lubrication as well, or blindness or visual impairment. These are all the different elements that can come up. So when we're talking about it, these are the different types of disabilities, and there are many more. But when we're talking about an amputee or back pain injury, erectile dysfunction, hip replacements, paraplegic, knee pain injury, wheelchair, all these different things, a wounded war veteran, spinal cord injury, strokes, hearing loss, all these different things. People think that sex is not an issue and it doesn't occur during these issues. But what we're trying to tell you today is that it does, and there are ways of enjoying it. Okay. So when we're talking about sex after spinal cord injury, for people with a spinal cord injury, discussing concerns about sexual mobility can sometimes be a difficult topic. Okay. For men, the higher the injury in the spine, the better chances of being able to have erections and ejaculate. For women, do not experience orgasms, but are able to experience sexual feelings in other parts of the bodies. That was said in the movie that I was showing earlier in the clip. Okay, and sexual intimacy is such an important part of our relationship and contributes to overall health. So you might have concerns or anxieties about having sex after a spinal cord injury, but if you speak about it and feel more comfortable, then it can be solved. Okay. Arthritis, knee pain or arthritis, whether in the hands, wrists, knees, or feet, can often prove an obstacle to sex and intimacy, but alternative positions that reduce the need for using the affected joints can go a long way towards making sex more accessible and enjoyable. Okay. Of ways to enjoy sex with arthritis, you may find that sex with arthritis can best be enjoyed when you plan an encounter at a time when you're generally feeling your best. That's so important, because when you're feeling your worst, there's no intention of having sex and there's no energy for that. But you could invite your partner to join you for a warm bath or shower to loosen the joints, and that could be heightened arousal. set the mood with send candles and so on and so forth. There's so many opportunities that can make arousal possible. Back pain injury can make nearly everything you can do more difficult, especially something as physical as sex. But it doesn't have to erase possibilities. Dealing with back pain in sex is like dealing with it everywhere. You just have to accommodate. The same with cerebral palsy and pain. When you're feeling a lot better, that's the time when there's an opportunity to have sex. Sex after stroke is a big issue. Usually good for physical and mental well-being of stroke survivors and their partners. This is interesting. They say sex can improve the quality of life and strengthen bonds of closeness. So if people think that you don't have sex after a stroke, they are totally wrong. Okay. Amputee as well. As you relearn yourself, you and your partner have to relearn how to have sex, relearn about your sexuality. But this is positive because it's an opportunity to born new trust within the relationship, to discover new passions and explore new ideas. Okay. I'm going to be showing you another ways of doing it later. Erectile dysfunction. That's a major issue. It doesn't necessarily have to be in disabled people where men become very insecure. There are many ways of getting through that. Okay. But let's move on to wheelchair. Okay. Now, a lot of people are feeling that when you talk about wheelchair, okay, wheelchair and having sex with a wheelchair or just as part of your process, you just have to fit it into the sex enjoyment. Okay. There doesn't have to be a limitation to sexuality. In fact, it can open up a whole new world. The chair itself can be incorporated kinkily and excitingly, and you and your partner can find a whole new avenues of intimacy, as you can see in these images here. Okay. There are all these different things that design to enhance sexual mobility. As you can see in the images here, one second. Wait. Sorry, one second, I'm stuck, I can't move here. Okay, and we call it the intimate rider. Okay, it's basically the original gliding sex chair, which is bought, and what it does, it helps couples overcome physical challenges and disabilities. Okay, this intimate rider's patented technology allows one to achieve a broader range of motion with minimal effort, allowing the person with disabilities and partner to unleash intimacy in a way that was not possible before. Now have a look at that image. It's wonderful because basically it's comfortable, easy to use, and stores discreetly away, and there's no right or wrong of which way to use it. Okay, that's called the intimate rider. And these devices offer balance and support that will allow one to share more intimate and stress-free moments and positions as well. The devices along the freedom of movement, they improve and satisfy the partner. It allows the person with disability to provide the motion. It allows discovery of new positions and creative angles. It enhances sexual performance and enjoyment and strengthens the relationship. Now, I'd like to focus on strengthening the relationship and enhancing sexual performance because if the partners feel it isn't possible, this glider can help a lot in improving it. So when we're talking about disabilities, we're also talking about sensory disabilities as well. This is an additional one is visual impairments and hearing loss. Okay, now when we're talking about visual impairments and intimacy, it's very, very important to realize that sex is also an issue with visual impairments. They cannot see visual cues, so they are erotically stimulated by touch, taste, aromas, pleasure, pain, and intuition. All these stimulate an erotic environment and cause wonderful sexual relationship, even though they cannot see. And what we're trying to say is that sexuality is no difference. Okay, they can feel a partner's responses to touch. They can sense with the partner's accuracy what stimulates a partner and the points of origination. For example, feeling where the tightness and wetness of the vagina or anus originates helps us initially identify, target, and stimulate the exact areas for maximum satisfaction. Okay, and they can also sense arousal by mental and emotional signals transferred by the partner. Okay, that's important to know. And when we're talking about hearing loss, a lot of the intimate zones can be in the ear, and discovering all the different erotic zones helps in terms of hearing loss, and it doesn't have to focus on the loss of hearing. Sign language. Okay, sign language is a good way of communicating as well. This is one for sex, by the way. In discussing sexual sign language, the goals of communication. When you understand sexual sign language, can be extremely useful for anyone who works or interacts with deaf people, by the way, including parents, parents, teachers, teachers of the deaf, interpreters, medical practitioners, as well as trained therapists. The goals of communication go well beyond sexuality. Without the means to discuss sexuality in a precise and insightful manner, for deaf people may not have the tools to either negotiate sex or communicate appropriately about it. And again, I'd like to say that even in sign language, a lot of the teachers teaching sign language do not include the area of sex. And this is where we need to get involved and say, yes, we need to allow us to understand what the sexual signs are in sign language for sexual communication as well, to make the client feel more comfortable. Okay, the challenges are that many are in sign language. Okay, many of the hand movements used to communicate on and non-sexual words are similar, requiring greater fluency than some people have. Okay, we tend to speak of sex in euphemisms or with slang terms, and often don't know proper terms to describe an orgasm, ejaculation, oral sex, etc. Okay, the discomfort many people have with sexuality is often intensified when communicating in sign language. You spoke about that. That's why people prefer not to deal with it, particularly since many of the hand gestures usually are very graphic. Okay, like this one here. Okay, in that image. So, what are we doing when we're talking about the role as a sex therapist, as a therapist in general, as a therapist, as a helper, a caregiver that needs to be more aware of sexual needs with people with disabilities? If I'm talking about the therapeutic setting, these sessions address the underlying emotional issues that may be impacting an individual's approach to and feelings about sex and the disability. The main thing is that you need to establish a feeling of feeling comfortable about talking about it. And if you can't talk about it, that's establishing, like we spoke, in sign language or some way to make the client or person feel so much more comfortable to actually include it in the session. Okay, as while it is sometimes offered as a form of couple therapy, it's typically offered to individuals as a tool to help them overcome inhibitions associated with their sex life and incorporate it successfully into their lives or newly adapted sex life. Success with sex therapy often depends on how committed clients are to the process. If clients are willing to put in the effort either alone or with a partner, they may reach their sexual goals, okay? Okay, but it may involve the following elements: experimentation. Couples with disabilities may need to try different activities. We saw some of the activities they may need to do, such as role playing or using sex toys to increase their desire. Other couples may need to adjust their sexual routine or positions as a result of the disability. Adapting to new changes, which isn't easy. There might have to be psychoeducation. Sometimes clients do not receive adequate sex education while they're growing up, because sometimes even when people don't have disabilities, we need to reassess what their sexual education was, and if they haven't got any, and the disability comes into it, makes it even worse. And as a result of desexualization, people with disabilities, it makes it more difficult. So consequently, they may not be aware of the anatomy and how the body functions. Okay, I need to work with that on psychoeducation again. So there is a very great way of sex therapists like to deal with the sensate focus, it's called. Okay, where you focus on all the different senses, and this specifically does work extremely well with people with disabilities, because we are focused on the sensitive areas, like in the movie that you saw, like in the film or the clip that you saw. Like certain areas can be erotic as well. So this is mainly used for couples and is designed to build trust and intimacy while reducing the anxiety. Okay. It can be used on the self. That's called self-sensate focus, in order to rediscover your own sexuality by touching yourself and seeing where your erotic elements are. Okay. But the most important thing about sensate focus, it goes through 3 stages. Okay. And the first stage is starting with non-sexual touching, progressing to genital touching, if possible, and usually ending with penetration, if possible. Okay. However, there is more to sex than just sexual intercourse, and I keep stating that. And it's the most important thing, because sex is enjoyable and it doesn't have to have any form of sexual intercourse. Okay. So when we're talking about common issues when we talk about common issues that are dealt with in sex therapy with disabilities, we talk a lot of issues that are depression, um, anxieties, anger management, stress management, alcohol and substance abuse. And I'd like to focus on depression, where many clients feel that they're not worthy. If they're in a relationship, it's very difficult because sometimes there could be a lot of sexual frustration and it doesn't work. And what's happening now is that there's depression within one side and the other side doesn't know how to deal with it. Anxiety happens and phobias, and a lot of anger management seems to come out, um, stress as well. And unfortunately, people tend to be use alcohol or substance abuse to cope with the situation that they're feeling that they cannot cope with their disability. Okay, and there's a low self-esteem. There are cases where domestic violence or abuse does happen, unfortunately. And this is where therapy does help when the relationship realizes that they're at a stop and they're a dead end and there's stress related problems within the relationship and the cause is the disability or not the disability. This is a time when therapists need to help. So, for example, the person with disability may feel concerned about finding a partner. So I'm going on a different level now. I'm talking about people that don't have a partner. Okay. They may be concerned about whether the partner will find them attractive. These are all the different issues before they find a relationship, because some people have a relationship, some people are alone, and some people don't see their self-worth as well as a result of the disability. There may be a lack of confidence about their sexual abilities or performance. Anxiety over your partner's feeling about you. If they're in a relationship, they may feel that maybe they cannot cope with my mood swings or the way I'm feeling, or that I don't feel like having sex because I'm too much pain today. Concern over pain during sexual activity. I spoke about that in a previous lecture. Less energy and desire for sex is the main issue as well. There's also concern about whether you can have children and constantly worried about what others will think, okay, what society thinks. So you need to focus on the importance of emotions. So just as sexuality is an integral part of human life, so is love. Okay, and that clip actually that I showed you showed how important love is, how important touch was, and how people have to just let go what other people think about their disabilities. Okay, when one has a disability or not, it is important to express feelings. For example, a partner of a person with a disability should be aware of how important it is to express love or regard, because if he doesn't, then that partner becomes very insecure and then may turn to the other way of drinking and alcohol and drugs and so on and so forth, and a low self-esteem. However, if not in a relationship, the most important thing is to remember that one is not defined by the disability or illness, but accepting the disability and working through it. Okay, so there may be a few practical matters. It takes energy to participate and enjoy sex. Okay, sex can be a very practical manner, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the disability may get in the way of your sex life, and so you'll have to deal with some factors, which include pain. So when there's pain, especially chronic pain, can certainly make you feel less like sex. But if you can distract yourself with sexual pleasure sometimes, you may find it helps to ease the pain sometimes. Okay, and I'm not talking about painful sex intercourse. I'm talking about general pain. And, if you're enjoying it, it probably will help you distract yourself from the sexual pain. This is also another one, fatigue. Okay, sex can feel like just another burden when fatigued and chronically fatigued. But yes, when the times do not, those are the times when you should, when you're not tired. Those are the time of the day when your energy levels are better. Then that's the time when you should enjoy sex and do it. Okay, mental state, that's so important. If one is not feeling positive or is suffering from anxiety or depression, one is unlikely, which is quite obvious, to want sex because the situation, the mental state is low. Here, the sex therapist's role is important and help ease these feelings and regain sexual interest. Okay, there could be medication that can help as well, which is important. Okay, um, if in a relationship and dealing with issues around disability and sexuality, the following tips may help. Okay, communication is the best, and we know that the most important thing is to communicate how you're feeling, openly discuss your frustration, state your needs clearly, not only around intimacy but everyday life. Read up a little bit more about your own disability and your condition and having help. Maybe the support groups, maybe there can be some professionals that can help you too. Seek help if necessary as well, including sexual sex therapists who may be able to help on that level as well as far as sex concerned. Keep an eye on each other. What is important to actually, if you're in a couple relationship and in a relationship, watch for depression. Because sadness doesn't necessarily mean depression, but if it gets worse, watch your general health as well, because acknowledge that the new normal, I love this one, the new normal, with the disabilities acquired and from an accident, chronic illness, for example, try to, once it's accepted and you discover what the new normal is for both of you, that's when you have a shift in the relationship for the better. You can see friends, staying socially connected is also important. Address the stress sometimes. Money issues, new divisions of labor and family responsibility can cause a lot of stress. These are the issues that need to be discussed. And of course, consider kindness, not anger, if possible. Okay. So when we're talking about a model, we're talking about Anon in 1976, he did what we call the please it model, okay, for sex therapists. So I think it's very important for us to understand, especially working with the special needs and for people with disability. What he's saying is that most people experience sexual problems can resolve them if they are given permission to be sexual, to desire sexual activity, and to discuss sexuality. If they receive limited information about sexual matters and are given specific suggestions about the ways to address sexual problems, okay? At these levels, we can try and move on, and I can show you what I mean in the next slide. We have the various intervention strategies by the sex therapist, and that can be incorporated in a framework known as the implicit model, okay? When we're talking about the implicit model, we're talking about P, which is permission. The LI is limited information, which I'm going to be explaining in a minute. The S is specific suggestions. And the final element is intensive therapy, which sometimes we may not get there. This model allows the therapist to determine the client's needs according to these different levels. Okay. And here we have the pyramid. So it's called the behavior treatment of sexual problems. Okay. But the most important thing is it's like the pyramid from Maslow. On the bottom is to allow permission. Permission meaning that we allow the person, we give them the feeling of feeling comfortable about talking about their needs, feeling it's okay to have sexual needs with a disability. It's okay to express that you need it. It's okay to express your frustration. Okay. From there, we move up the hierarchy and get information. Maybe we can have specific suggestion about how we can have sex and enjoyable, like I showed you with all those different apparatus that were previously in the images previously. And finally, if we do, we can work on intensive therapy, which can be on a private level, on an individual level, or a couple level as well. So if we're actually talking about permission, okay, it's the permission to discuss and giving the client permission to initiate sexual discussion, feeling comfortable about it, okay? Because if you don't allow that feeling of feeling comfortable about discussing your initiative sexual discussion and feeling comfortable about it, there is no ways the client is going to move up and move on to the next stage, okay? But when we do finally move to the next stage, it's providing the limited information to allow sexual functioning. This could be sexual education as well for those that may not have had much sexuation, because especially those people that have grown up with a sexual disability and growing up in childhood, people thought that they have no need to have sexual education, which is a myth, okay? And no need to have sex. And of course, the limited information, it is our job to try and refill the gaps and give them sexual education on that level. And from there, we move on to specific suggestions, which gives specific suggestions for clients to proceed with sexual relations, what you can do, what you can't do, what it does for you, where is the erotic zones, how you're feeling about it, where you're at, how your partner's feeling. But the main level that you can get to after dealing with these levels is intensive therapy, which provides the issues that actually deal with it. And the issues could be the psychological elements that we spoke about, anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, and anything else that can go with as a result of these things that could affect their relationship. Another model could be which we call the explicit model, which means that you can take any stage. You don't have to specifically work up up the pyramid. The extended implicit model extends the original model by emphasizing the role that permission gives plays or plays at all stages. And consequently, each stage of limited information, specific information, intensive therapy is underpinned by permission giving. Okay, so if you want to do intensive therapy or if you want to do specific suggestion, it's okay to deal with it. You don't have to go up and start dealing with it. But in my opinion, in my personal professional opinion, you have to give that feeling that you're feeling comfortable to talk about it. Okay, it does indicate that intensive therapy may be offered at any stage. Okay, so you don't have to worry about making them feel comfortable. You can deal with it at any stage, but it could also be what might your partner feel about that. Are there any other things that you have thought about? What have we not covered fully in our session? Okay, what we spoke, you mentioned, and we discussed. How has this been since then? Okay, that's a follow up. How helpful was the leaflet I gave you? That's starting with like limited information, and I gave you an answering of questions about sexuality. Was there anything that surprised you? Do you have any further questions or concern? Okay, so basically what we're saying is in this level, it can be reflect, review, reflect, review. It could be, you can use any of these levels, and that's the other option to use when we're dealing with sexuality and sex therapy. But I think one of the best models that we're going to be dealing with and talking about right now is called sensate focus. It's very, very common to sex therapists, very common in couples generally that have lost their desire for sexual connection or intimacy and touch. And the aim is basically not to focus on sexual intercourse itself, but to focus on the intimacy and touch element. Okay, and that's sensate focus. A very, very interesting way of trying to get through to your couples in showing how important touch is and communication as well. So how does this sensate focus work? First of all, to explain generally, it's totally about touching and being touched, okay? It's totally two distinct activities. You can maximize the potential of sensate focus by beginning without preconceived notions of what will you experience. For example, the idea of this is to say, okay, we're not talking sexually. What we're trying to do is improve the sexual and emotional experience through touch and being touched. And it is highly useful sex therapy or professions to address sexual desire as well as a spate of sexual distresses and dysfunctions. Okay. First of all, this was developed by Masters and Johnson on the basis of their research and experience. So we know that this does work. It serves to foster mindful connection and self with the partner. And it does release anxiety through repeated touching experiences. So what we're seeing before I move on to the next slide is that we're actually seeing some form of focusing on touch and intimacy. All right. And what this does, it releases tension because most couples or even when we're talking about disabilities, there is less intimate. It's more practical. And what we want to try and do is make it more intimate. Okay. And how do we do that? We talk about phase one. Okay. So we can take turns in touching, kissing, stroking, anywhere on your partner's body, but it all depends on where the disability is, what the story is, but it doesn't matter where, but you can just touch anywhere and anywhere that they feel comfortable. But out of bounds are the genitals and breasts, okay? This, stage one, is completely and utterly out of bounds. So anywhere else, it could be the ears, it could be the head, it could be the toes. For partner sensate focus, the partner one touches for 10 or more minutes. That's all. It's so simple, but yet very powerful, okay? And for 10 minutes, the partner then discovers which areas does it for them, okay? The partner then they change over for the next 10 minutes, but not touching any genital areas, okay? And avoid touch that leads to orgasm or intercourse until the last phase, which is phase 4, okay? So now, when we're talking about that first phase, the idea is when you do 10 minutes for one level and then the other one, then you change over to the other one. Afterwards, the idea is to talk about how the experience helped and how important it is and how meaningful it was for both sides. Because if it wasn't meaningful, then there's no good doing it. And usually we have a lot of resistance in this thing because they don't feel in this exercise. Most clients, even if it's people with disabilities or not with disabilities, most clients feel that it's an exercise and it's homework and they don't feel like they need to do it. But once they do try it, the whole world and experience changes for them. But phase one needs to stay on phase one until they are ready to move into stage two. And the therapist works through them to see where they're at and where they're ready to move on to stage two. So stage one can stay for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, for a month. They don't necessarily have to move on to phase two yet, okay? If there has been a lack of intimacy and touch for a long time. And moving on to phase two is the same as phase one, except that genitals and breasts can be included. But what I'm saying in phase one is that I forgot to say is that there's no clothes involved, just underwear, okay? Phase two is that the underwear could be possibly removed, but you can touch the genitals and include them. All right. Phase three is partnered sensored focus only. So you engage in mutual touching, kissing and stroking of each other's bodies, stimulating. Start with phase one, touching, then move to phase two. Avoid touching that leads to orgasm and intercourse. That's totally and utterly out of bound. Again, we're moving for 10 minutes to see how that goes, okay? And finally, when we get to phase four, we go through, process through phase one to three, and then move into position as you're going to have intercourse if necessary. And most cases, intercourse doesn't actually usually happen, even in phase four. Okay, it's more of the intimacy that they enjoy. And especially if there's disabilities, we have to work on whether there will be intercourse or not and how we can do it. But if there isn't, then remain in phase three and enjoy the moment. So it's known as a structured hierarchy of touching experiences. And the clients learn to turn off the internal chatter and tune into their bodies, manage their minds. So what we're saying is, even if you're disabled, there are so many areas that can be intimate, and it builds comfort and accommodating sexual tension. Okay, it's simple but elegant and effective strategy. It is helpful for understanding and managing blocks to sexual feelings and expression, and for promoting healthy adaptation to the psychosocial challenges following disabilities. Okay, and when we're saying that, it helps just to feel comfortable. And that feeling of comfortable is at that moment you completely forget that you've got a disability and you're in pure pleasure with your partner. Okay. And I think that's the most important thing about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sexual intercourse. It could be touch and everything else which goes with it, which brings the form of pleasurable. Okay. So whether the challenges are as a result, okay, of disabilities or illness, it might be a little bit more difficult to imply sensate focus. Okay, that's why I'm saying you may need to necessarily stay in stage one. Stage one meaning that you just focus on touch and not touch the genital areas, because that is the most important area where it can strengthen your confidence, your sexual confidence, your ability to accept the disability and feel totally relaxed, and sometimes even forget pain when you're in that moment of pleasure. Okay. Okay, but it's also difficulties of how primarily associated with that's how clients actually sometimes think about sex. If we're seeing that they're totally anti-touch and it's very difficult, the longer this exercise is going to take, and we will be staying in stage one. While the most important goal of sensate focus with aging, chronically ill, or disabled couples is to minimize pain, which you spoke about, and maximize comfort and mobility, the next most important step is to provide education, counseling, and therapy that can challenge the thought patterns and limited beliefs, such as, oh my God, my sex life is over. It is different. It's no good anymore. I'm not normal. Sex is pleasurable. And we need to change that to sex is pleasurable. We're able to have pleasure because it's pleasurable. That's very important. What we're seeing is that the shift can happen through this wonderful experience of sensate focus. Okay. And it's wonderful to know that and I'm just going to quickly go back and just briefly run back on the process of this. So when we're talking about the model, we're talking about allowing people to feel comfortable, giving limited information, specific suggestions, and then coming to intensive therapy. When we want to go to intense therapy, we can suggest this model of sensate focus, which is homework for them, and it allows them to get in touch with their feelings and allow them to enjoy being touched. Okay, during those 3 stages, 4 stages, and if we get to the fourth, that's actually quite amazing. Okay, so what I'd like to do, and now, if there's any questions, I'd like to take time before we summarize this session for today. Are there any questions at this stage? I'd love to ask if there's any questions about sensate focus, any differences about any thoughts about sex therapy with disabilities, any things about your attitudes about disabilities, anything, questions you'd like to ask, how you felt when you were talking about sexuality and then putting together with disabilities, what was going through your mind when you saw that movie. We went through a whole process of understanding rights of people with disabled and how they can actually enjoy sex in any way possible. Okay, and it doesn't have to be conventional sex; it has to be some form of enjoyment. Okay, and to end it, we spoke about the sensate focus, which connecting to each person and allowing touch to be the most important element is the way to strengthen a relationship with disabilities. Are there any questions at this stage before I come into the summary? Anyone would like to ask a question? Any questions about the model, the please-it model? Was that clear? You understood the different stages? Because the main part about the please-it model is actually feeling comfortable about for yourself as well in speaking about sexuality with your clients, whether they're disabled or not. It's the most important, because if you don't serve and give your clients a feeling of comfortability in sexuality, it will be very difficult to move up the pyramid. And like I said, it's trying to change the stigma of being in a relationship where it's not going to work and that sex is pleasurable after all. And I see we have a question which I'm happy about to see. Does Medicare pay for some of the? It all depends. That's a question you need to check with the medical aid within your country. That most cases they should be subsidized, I assume. I'm hoping so. Yes. For some of the equipment you're saying, or for some of the therapy, or both? Yes, I think I would assume they should be subsidized, hopefully. I mean, there are private organizations. That's something that I unfortunately won't be able to answer. For it would need to be checked out. I assume it could be subsidized, hopefully, but these physical instruments are absolutely wonderful to enhance sexuality and very much promoted. I'm not sure if medical pay does subsidize it. I'm hoping they do. Thank you for that question. Any more questions? Any suggestions how to ready a couple for sensate focus when they're anxious? Okay, wonderful question. Thank you for that. Okay, so what I would do suggest is, first of all, when you do suggest it, it's first of all you're educating them. Okay, you're in the second level of the pyramid. Okay, and you're just suggesting a wonderful way of reconnecting. Okay, but before you get to speaking about sensate focus, you need to focus on the anxiety and why they feel they are nervous about touch and intimacy and where that's meeting them, and give them an option of doing a little bit of homework long term, but discussing how they're feeling about the option first of all. Saying to them, it's okay, we're not saying this is homework, you don't have to do it, but what do you feel about it? And working on the anxious elements and the resistance to the exercise. What I'm hearing and what I've done in my experience is that a lot of people are very resistant at the beginning. And every session that you meet up, we start rephrasing and say, what's happening with the exercise? And they say, we didn't. And eventually they will get to a position where they'll be happy to talk about it. But you need to focus on why they're not, what are the anxious areas and why is it difficult to actually do, what are their difficulties in trying the relationship in touch and having more touch. Okay. In order to make them ready for that, I think it's more of asking them, what is touch for you? How do you feel about touch? When was the last time you felt an intimate relationship with your partner? How would you like your partner to feel? What would you like? You open when you're feeling comfortable and making them feel comfortable, they will start opening up, and then you can say, "Oh, I have a wonderful idea. Maybe when you finish the session, you can start enjoying each other's company better and feeling the worthiness of touch together. And if you're into it, I can share an example that you might be interested in doing. In most cases, I'll say, okay, let's try it. Okay. But it is a lot of work on working on the anxious elements before you actually start that. Is that okay? Any other questions? Okay. Um, You're welcome. And also, I think also the most good takeaway as well, and then we're going to end the session for today. I think a good takeaway as well is also to focus. It's okay not to want sex. It's okay if you're tired, but the main thing is if you're feeling less tired, there are moments during the day when possibly you might not be less tired, and maybe try and use those moments when you're more active and feeling stronger to try and have some form of sexual contact or intimate contact together. Okay. So I just want to go back to 1 second. Okay, so if we're doing the summary very briefly, the myth that disabled people, that's a complete myth, as we spoke about right at the beginning. Okay, having a physical ability doesn't change your sexuality or desire to express it. Disability may affect ability to have a regular sex life, but one may have to approach sexual activity differently, like we spoke about, all those different equipments. And question and concern may come up relating to physical and emotional health. Emotional health is also very important. Need to focus on depression and accepting the disability before anything can move on further. Disabilities, sexual aids are designed to improve sexual mobility while using the natural motion of your body. We saw that. And living with disability doesn't mean you can't enjoy sexual intimacy at all with your partner. Both the disabled and his or her partner learn that when open, honest communication is possible and sexual potential is present, a mutually rewarding sexual relationship can be obtained and developed because sex is pleasurable. And I love this one, pleasure able. You're able to have pleasurable sex, and that's your takeaway, pleasurable sex, and that needs to be remembered. And I thank you very much for listening. I hope it was something that was interesting, and that you learned a little bit from this area of sex therapy and disabilities. It's a wonderful element to help people feel more comfortable and feel less alone and help break the stigmas, like we said. So thank you very much. Is there any more questions? I'll be happy to answer. But if not, thank you for your time.